Hey friends, it's Spence. Today I'll be talking about why I don't recommend Chasing PACQUIAO by Rod Pulido. But I'll start by talking about what I knew about the book and Rod Pulido as an author before reading it. So the first I've ever heard about Rod Pulido was when there was kind of an issue with Own Voices where they were kind of forcing queer people to come out just to prove that they were, worthy of having the label of Own Voices. Rod Pulido was affected by that because I guess he was writing a queer novel, but I guess they didn't want to support him and consider his book queer, or I guess consider his book Own Voices just because he was married to a woman and that he was, I guess, forced to come out as bisexual, which is never cool, by the way. But that's all I really knew about Rod prior to reading his book, but I did know, of course, because of all the drama that was going on, that he had an upcoming book, and that is, I guess, Chasing PACQUIAO. And to give an overview of what Chasing PACQUIAO is about, I'll just read to you what's on Goodreads because I guess it's shorter and more straight to the point that way. So it says here, experience the extreme joys, sorrows, and triumphs of a queer Filipino-American teenager struggling to prove himself in an unforgiving world. A poignant coming-of-age story perfect for fans of Patron Saints of Nothing and Julie Takes a Breath. Self-preservation, that's Bobby's motto for surviving his notoriously violent high school unscathed. Being out and queer would put an unavoidable target on his back, especially in a Filipino community that frowns on homosexuality. It's best to keep his head down, get good grades, and stay out of trouble. But when Bobby is outed in a terrible way, he no longer has the luxury of being invisible. A vicious encounter has him scrambling for a new way to survive by fighting back. Bobby is inspired by champion Filipino boxer Manny Pacquiao to take up boxing and challenge his tormentor. Then Pacquiao publicly declares his stance against queer people, and Bobby's faith in his hero and in himself is shaken to the core. A powerful and unflinching debut that will both shatter and uplift hearts with every read. Content warning for profanity, violence, and homophobic language. So that is essentially what Chasing PACQUIAO is about. Now, upon hearing about the synopsis, what did I think? Well, of course, being queer and Filipino, I'm not Filipino-American, but having that kind of representation for queer Filipinos is kind of important to me. And I thought the premise was really interesting and there were a lot of good intentions going into it. I thought this could be really good. This could be very helpful for queer youth, especially for queer Filipino-American youth who could be going through something similar. But I also thought that this could either go very well or very terribly. And that's because I wanted to see how the whole Manny Pacquiao thing is discussed, how it's handled. I was very curious to see how nuanced the discussion was going to be because there are a lot of factors that come into play with regards to Manny Pacquiao's homophobia, like how people idolize him as a boxer, and of course because that homophobia stemmed from his Christian faith. The other reason I was very curious to see how this plays out in the novel is because I thought the premise was very Filipino-American. And what I mean by that is, I guess, the shock that the main character has at Manny Pacquiao's homophobic statements, like the disappointment, and I'm just talking about the synopsis, like what's there. Because for me, growing up as a homeland Filipino, like homophobia was the norm, and what I mean by that is I was surrounded by so much homophobia, and obviously knew that it stemmed from, I guess, the Christian faith or the Catholic faith, because most of the people I grew up with were Christian or Catholic. It was always just kind of the assumption that whenever someone was Christian or Catholic or anything adjacent to those faiths, that they were some level of homophobic, and that's because a lot of people use the Bible to say that that's the sin that Sodom and Gomorrah was burned for, or they quote Paul and say that the man is not supposed to lie with the man, and that sort of thing. So it was interesting to me that that would be the reaction of a Filipino-American, just like outright disappointment and shock. Because for me, when Manny Pacquiao came up with those statements, I was like, oh, I wasn't like shocked that he would feel that way. I guess for a lot of us homeland Filipinos, the shock in terms of our reaction to Manny Pacquiao's statements and homophobia is not so much that we were like surprised that he would say that, but more so that we were disappointed that a very prominent figure who's known worldwide would make a statement so publicly that would give ammunition to people who are already homophobic and like doing hate crimes and that kind of thing. But because I'm not Filipino-American, I was very curious to see, okay, so what was it like for Filipino-Americans? I was curious to see how that reaction would play out. And so I thought this could go either very well or very terribly. Anyway, recently, Rod had tweeted that he was looking for people to be part of his street team to promote his book. Now, if you guys are not familiar, if you opt into a street team for an author's upcoming book. Your job is basically to promote the book, and it really depends on the author and the publisher how they want to use the street team, but in a lot of cases you get access to an advanced reader's copy of the book so that you can read it and review it prior to the book actually being published and put out into the world. Basically, it's like a win for all because the author gets free publicity for their book, and then whoever's in the street team gets early access to the book before it's even published. Now, I had only been part of one street team before. This was only my second time being part of a street team. And in both of these street teams, there was kind of a point system where if you promote the book enough on social media or whatnot, there are like challenges that you have to do. If you get enough points, then you get access to the ARC or the advanced reader's copy. Now, if I were to compare the street team for Rod as compared to how things ran in the street team for the other street team I was a part of, I would say that Rod's street team, I was not necessarily the biggest fan of how the point system worked. But because I'm not like super experienced in street teams, and I was like, whatever, I can't really like compare if it's like run badly or not. It was just like not my favorite, but it was like whatever. The one thing that I did notice though is that Rod, in his like rules on the street team, which was on Slack, he had indicated that to get an access to the ARC, please leave a positive review, whether it's on Goodreads, Amazon, that kind of thing. And then he explicitly said, if you didn't enjoy the book, kindly just don't leave a review. And I thought that was interesting, and so I asked some of my friends who were, I guess, more experienced with like reading ARCs and that kind of thing, like, is this pretty normal to like ask reviewers not to review a book negatively? And I was told that it's kind of weird to make a rule that you can't review a book negatively ever. But like for a lot of street teams that my friends were a part of, the rule was usually if your review of the book is going to be negative, kindly wait until the book is published and like put out there. And I think the purpose of that is because as a street team, your purpose is to promote the book, like give it good publicity. And so if you're not going to contribute to that, just kindly wait until the publication date. And so with that, I kind of like made the conclusion that, okay, so maybe that's what Rod meant, because I kind of given him the benefit of the doubt that he wouldn't ask me to like just never leave a review, because that would kind of be censorship. It's like, okay, now that I know the rules, I'm good to go. And at the beginning, my experience with the street team was good. There wasn't anything like noteworthy about the experience. It was just kind of like a regular street team where whenever the author posts something on Twitter or on Instagram, you just kind of share it, and then you report back and say, hey, I did this to promote your book, and then you're given points to equate to that. I kind of fell off a little bit after the first few weeks just because I was super swamped with work, and I wasn't really looking at like my messages on like different social media channels. But I guess there was a point where Rod noticed that a lot of people were falling off and a lot of people were not really reporting back. And so he had decided to message people on social media, kind of follow up and say, hey, if you are still interested, you're so close to getting enough points to get access to the ARC, feel free to come back on board and keep gaining points. By the time that I received that, I was like, okay, I'm not super busy, let me get back on board. And I saw that I was like just a few points away from getting an ARC. And so I kind of caught up on points by retweeting and sharing things on my stories like, hey, Rod's book is coming out soon, and here's why it's great, sort of a thing. I did make a mistake in sharing one of his posts on Instagram that I thought was gonna get me points, but then he said on Slack that he was like, hey, points only count for posts that are directly related to my book, not, just like adjacently related to the book. And so I was like, okay. So I was like at 29 points then, and you needed like 31 points to get access to the ARC, or something like that. But he was like, hey, since you're already so close anyway, here's the NetGalley widget so you can get an ARC. And I thought that was really nice of him because, I hadn't really reached 31 points yet because I had made that one mistake. But in order to, I guess, feel like I actually deserved it, I went back to social media and found another tweet that I could retweet to get a point. So I got, I guess, 31 points, and then I got access to the ARC. Now let's talk about my reading experience with the book. So I guess overall, when I started reading, my main, I guess, reaction or feeling was kind of like, I don't hate this. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I don't hate it, but it's just kind of bland. It's kind of mid. It's kind of a basic story. Before I get into, I guess, the things that I didn't like about this book, because there are a lot, I want to be fair and say what I did like about the book. My throat is already sore. So one of the things that I liked about the book is that it partially delivered what I was looking for and what I was anticipating. And that is, I kind of wanted to see like how the reaction would play out to, or I guess the main character's reaction would be to PACQUIAO's statements. And I thought it was executed really well, actually. How Bobby was disappointed and confused and heartbroken when the man who was his hero, who he looked up to for so long, had made those statements about people like him. And I thought those parts were written very well. They were very emotional. I think Rod did a good job of kind of capturing the feeling of disappointment in people that you looked up to as your heroes. And I'm very well acquainted with that feeling. As some of you may know, I grew up in a religion where I looked up to a lot of the church leaders as kind of my heroes. They were like people I looked up to and admired and wanted to be like when I grew up. But because of like the homophobic statements that they made, there's a lot of pain that goes with that. And I think Rod did a good job actually at capturing that feeling. I know I said earlier that the story was kind of bland, but I guess I kind of liked it for that as well. The story was simple and straightforward. It's not hard to follow. There's also kind of a cuteness factor in the romance, and I see the value in that. I like when we have queer stories that are just simple, straightforward, not like have so much drama, because the world's already a terrible place, and for a lot of queer people, their relationship with their identity and with their faith and with society is already very complicated, so there is a lot of value in having just simple, cute, straightforward queer stories. One other thing I'll give to this book is how I was reminded of the poetry form, the Tanaga, which I knew I studied like when I was way back in grade school, but Bobby, like one of his hobbies is writing Tanaga, which is like a style of Filipino poetry where there are 7 syllables in 4 lines, and those 4 lines rhyme. Now, was it kind of weird to see Tanagas written in English? Yes, it was. But I was like willing to let that slide because most of the haikus we write aren't even in Japanese, so like it's whatever. Now let's talk about some of the things that I didn't like. So the first thing I didn't like about this book is the messaging is very in your face. Like the story is not so much about the characters than it is about what they're trying to say and about the message. And sometimes that works for me, but like when the synopsis kind of hints that it's more about the character's journey, I'm expecting more about the character's journey and not so much his opinions and things like that. The message is just really in your face, kind of like House of the Cerulean Sea levels, like, which again is not necessarily a bad thing, I just don't think it was executed well. The other thing I didn't like was how much of a caricature the characters were. Like literally all of the character archetypes that you usually find in books, you could like just map them one-to-one with like each of the characters. So like the ally friend, like the mentor, the love interest, the bully, the wild card. Because the characters were like that, they weren't very interesting because they just had that one, like, I guess, personality trait with little to no nuance. And I guess they were just kind of boring to follow because you are who you expect them to be. And the reason that significantly contributed to my, I guess, lack of enjoyment for this book is because the story generally lacks so much nuance. Like whatever you get in the synopsis, the thing that I read to you before, that's pretty much the story. That's pretty much it. So what you read from the synopsis, it's basically you've read the book. Like Bobby's dealing with homophobia. He decides to fight back because he is inspired by Manny Pacquiao because he's a boxer. And then Manny Pacquiao makes those homophobic statements. And then Bobby is shocked from that. And then he rises in spite of that. That's the story. And there's literally nothing else to say about it. This book is also very short, and it could have benefited from being a little bit longer, actually significantly longer, because there were so many themes that could have been explored, but they were just like touched on, and you were like, okay, maybe there will be discussion about that. And then there never was the discussion. Like the discussion never happened. Like so many things were introduced, but they were just never revisited. Like drug abuse in underprivileged communities, Filipinos in the healthcare industry. That's a big topic that could have been addressed. How bullying can affect a child's academic performance. And the thing that kind of bugged me that wasn't really revisited, that the thing that like I wish that we could have explored more, is how domestic abuse and bigoted beliefs can be passed down generationally. The antagonist is kind of abusive towards the main character, Bobby, because he was also experiencing abuse from his dad. And I was expecting a lot more nuance to that because, okay, maybe we'll get to understand where the antagonist is coming from. Maybe we explore generational trauma and things like that, but it's just kind of like used as an excuse in passing, oh, he's homophobic because his dad is, sort of a thing. And we just never get into that. There was also a third act conflict that was absolutely unnecessary. I was like, why are we doing this? Like, we're so close to the end, and why are we introducing this drama when it doesn't need to be there? Overall, it was a very unsatisfying ending because it ended so abruptly, and also because what you read in the synopsis, like the thing with like Bobby's reaction to Manny Pacquiao's homophobic statements, that premise isn't really the premise. That's the thing that happens towards the end of the book. It literally happens past the 70% mark of the book. And when you have only a few pages left after that, we don't really get to explore more of like the impact that those homophobic statements have had on Bobby and the entire Filipino queer community, or I guess the entire queer community. Like what's promised to us, the nuanced discussion on Manny Pacquiao, it's never really fully fleshed out. Instead, most of the book is Bobby finding inspiration in Pacquiao. So like, it kind of doesn't really deliver on what was promised. I'll link in the description below a video review made by Therese from Theresa's Nook. One of the things that she said there is that she felt kind of ick reading it because most of the book was focused on Bobby idolizing Pacquiao and having faith in him as a hero and as a Filipino idol. So yeah, I just wanted more from the discussion on the effect that Pacquiao's statements have had, but we just never really get it. And that's why the ending was very unsatisfying and just like wrapped up too neatly and too quickly. I'm gonna drink some more water because this next one's a doozy. Okay, so more things I didn't like about the book. Those other things, I guess, are kind of forgivable, and if those were the only problems that I've had with the book, this would still sit at a 3 stars. There were just things that I didn't like, but the book is still, you know, it's a good book, it has a good message, it has very good intentions. So if those were my only issues, I would be like, okay, it's fine. It's not my favorite, but not terrible, you know? But then we get to other things that I had problems with in this book. And number 1 is the acne and fat shaming. So we already know that our antagonist is a bully. He physically assaults our main character, is very homophobic. And the way that our main character Bobby and his love interest and his best friend react to that is they call him Bruno Scars. And that's because, you know, Bruno Mars, he's a Filipino American. And also because our antagonist, he's on steroids and he has bad acne and he's fat. And they, I guess, poke fun at that fact. Now, I get it. These kids are in high school. The insult is directed to someone who's very bad. He's very homophobic and probably deserves, like, the hate, right? But to resort to fat shaming and making fun of him for his acne instead of his character is the big problem for me. Because when I was in high school, I was bullied for my acne and for being chubby. Even until now, I have acne scars. And I try my best to take care of my skin, but especially in high school, my pimples were really, really bad. And I was called names for it, and I guess my first year of high school was very miserable. My second year of high school, I lost a ton of weight because I thought that I was like super fat and ugly because of it. So to read about protagonists who are shaming someone, regardless of whether they're homophobic and a bully or not, and choose to attack their physical appearance, specifically having acne and being fat, that just doesn't sit well with me. I don't feel good about it. Because to me, that's like, okay, where do they draw the line when it comes to making fun of people? Like if someone's a bully, sure, they make fun of him for having acne and for being fat. But like, who's to say that they won't do the same thing towards anyone else who maybe insults them just a little? Maybe they're not even homophobic and they just dislike a person. Will they resort to fat shaming and calling a person ugly because they have acne? I wouldn't know, but in my book, probably. And I guess I just wasn't really comfortable with that. Is it realistic? Absolutely. And putting this out there, and especially because these are the protagonists of your book, you're setting an example for others to thinking that shaming people for their physical appearance or for having acne is okay just because people are bullying you. Like, and I've just never bought into that. I don't believe in shaming people for their physical appearance because I've been a victim of that. Another thing that I didn't like about this book is how unnatural dialogue is. Now, a lot of the dialogue is actually very cheesy. You know, when Bobby and his love interest, when they talk, they're very like sweet with each other, and that's fine with me. Does it make me cringe? Yes, but it's fine, and I can deal with cheesy. I mean, I read middle grade books, but the part about the dialogue that felt unnatural to me, and I'll make a disclaimer about this later on, was how Tagalog words were used. So because Bobby's Filipino American, also the antagonist is also Filipino American, so they speak both English and Tagalog. And of course, because they probably never grew up speaking Tagalog, it's like their English is just sprinkled with Tagalog words. But it sounds super awkward. And I'm not sure if reading this to you is gonna make sense to you if you don't speak both languages, but in case you do, here are some examples. Calling someone a tanga bitch, you don't pay attention to any of that tanga bullshit. It's like those words are just so awkwardly inserted into the dialogue when they don't belong there. It just sounds very awkward to me. Here's another one. They use the word gago. Damn bakla, let's kick his ass, Jorge. What are you waiting for, gago? My thoughts jump from the drugged out gago sitting behind me to the gay bashing asshole waiting for me somewhere beyond the classroom door. This is my favorite because it's so funny. Shut the hell up, you damn gago. And it's just In my experience, nobody talks like that. Not even the Filipino Americans I know. For me, it's awkward to say tanga bitch when you can just say stupid bitch. Or tanga bullshit, stupid bullshit. Because there are English words for that. In my experience, when you speak both languages, either you go full English or full Tagalog, or you speak Taglish, which isn't this. It isn't this awkward. Because in my experience, the way Taglish works is you only borrow words from another language when there isn't an easy to access word in the current language that you're using. That's how you kind of code switch. And I know this is very relative to different people's experiences. That's why, for example, here in the homeland, there are people who speak majority Tagalog and they know a few words in English. There are people who speak majority English and they borrow words from Tagalog. And so you have like these different activations of how the Tagalog language is used. You have such forms of the language as konyo, which is the word used to describe the kind of Taglish that is used by usually like the upper middle class. But yeah, I don't really know how to describe it, but there's like a certain rhythm and certain flow that Taglish has. Isn't this? This feels very stilted and very weird. Now, I will say, as a disclaimer, I'm not Filipino-American. I guess my reaction when reading that was like, okay, I'm not Filipino-American. Maybe this is just how they talk, and I just don't know. But I do know a number of Filipino-Americans, and for the most part, they do not talk like this. So I don't know, maybe that's just the kind of way of speaking that Rod is surrounded by or familiar with. But in my experience, it's just not. This dialogue is very awkward. Finally, let's get to the real reason that I was upset with this book. And that is because of how it calls the word bakla a slur. Now I'm going to read to you some quotes from the book that mention this. So this is one of the scenes where the main character is talking to a friend and the friend says, "I know you ain't bakla." And then the paragraph after that says, "The Tagalog gay slur is a gut punch to my psyche." It's explicitly said there that the word bakla is a Tagalog gay slur. Now when I read that, I was like, is it a slur? I went to my friends and asked, like, guys, what's your opinion? Is the word bakla a slur? We went into this discussion about it really depends on the context, it really depends on the tone, why you're using the word bakla. And my thought process when they said that was like, isn't that just how we use the word gay? When someone says, oh, that's so gay, that's so gross. That's when the word gay is used as a pejorative, but it doesn't necessarily mean that gay is a slur. But I was like, okay, let's just keep reading. Maybe this was just a rookie mistake or whatever. But then we get to later on in the book where the main character returns to the same friend, or I guess it was his cousin. And the cousin is like, for real? You bakla and shit? And then the main character responds, that ain't a cool word, but yeah, I'm queer. And then I was like, does Rod not know that bakla means queer? So why would the word bakla be a slur and the word queer is not? And that just really rubbed me the wrong way, because you're saying that this word that's used in English is valid, but this word that we so commonly use to refer to queer people and gay people in the Philippines is a slur? And then I realized, did any homeland Filipinos, like beta readers, read this? Because this is a very easy mistake to fix. This is such a blunder. Like even a little research or a little consultation from a homeland Filipino reader could have corrected this. Someone could have said, yeah, it's not really a slur. Or if I read that line that bakla isn't a cool word, I would be like, well, bakla is a cool word because it's our word for gay. It's our word for queer. And at this point, I was already having some doubts that, like, did Rod consult with any like homeland Filipino beta readers for this? If the Taglish is this awkward, and if you make such an embarrassing mistake as calling bakla a slur, it just tells me that you really didn't look into this. You really didn't consult anyone about this. This honestly reminds me of such blunders by Filipino Americans again, as this one fantasy book where the fantasy land is called the land of Tigang, which is a Filipino word, but it literally means horny. And it's weird that they didn't think to check with someone like, hey, what does this word mean? Because it's kind of embarrassing to call your fantasy land the land of horny. Then there's that Marvel comic with a Filipino-American main character named Ari Agbayani, and Ari means genitals in Tagalog. So these people, including Rod, obviously didn't consult with homeland Filipinos who speak the language and could have said very quickly, very easily, hey, Ari means genitals, Tigang means horny, bakla isn't a slur. This is not how you use the word tanga and gago. I'm tired of this. So to illustrate my point, let me take you back and kind of explain why bakla is not the slur that I guess Rod and this book thinks that it is. If you look into the etymology, and I'm not a language expert or anything, but this is what I've learned in college, the word bakla is actually a contraction of the syllables ba and la, ba representing babayi or woman, and la representing lalaki or man. And when ba and la are combined into the word bakla, it is used generally to describe a man like a woman or an effeminate gay man. And I know a lot of people are gonna say, but bakla is used as a slur because it's used to insult people. I wouldn't say it's a slur, it's more of a pejorative. And it's one used only by misogynists, because when you say that someone is bakla or a man like a woman and you think that's an insult, that just tells you that you think that being feminine or being like a woman is weak or lesser. Because most of the insults that use the word bakla are used for men where they're not manning up or acting masculine, if their voice is too pitchy, if they're a little bit soft and, acting a little gay. So this is a word that is used by people who are either misogynistic or homophobic or both. But because at its core it means an effeminate and or gay man, for the longest time it's been reclaimed because people started to realize, what's wrong with being gay? What's wrong with being feminine? So when people say, oh, parang kang bakla, or you're like a bakla, people started realizing, okay, and so what? And what's so bad about that? And the only time anyone would ever take as an insult when they're called bakla is when they're homophobic, because why would you call me gay? Ba't mo ko tatawagin bakla? Kadiri yun eh, like that's gross. That's when you would take offense to being called bakla, if you're homophobic or if you're misogynistic, because you think displaying feminine traits makes you somehow weaker or lesser. So it really doesn't make sense for our main character to be so insulted by the word bakla when he accepts himself to be gay and queer. Now, the term bakla has extended beyond just effeminate gay men to even masculine gay men, because, again, there's not really another word for gay or queer. In some instances, even trans women have adapted this label. It is not uncommon at all to walk into a random parlor here in the Philippines, find a salon full of either trans women or people who identify as men, but who are very femme-presenting. Like, they have long hair, they have makeup on, but they still identify as men, and those people are called bakla. The term bakla has also extended to bisexuals. Now, there is a word for bisexual, which is selahis, which I sometimes identify as, but because it was never really part of my common speech, and I guess bakla is more all-encompassing, I kind of interchange those terms, like bakla or selahis, for my identity specifically. Even queer women have adapted the term bakla for themselves, although some others prefer terms like lesbiana and tomboy, which is very different from what Americans term as a tomboy. All this is to say, bakla is kind of our word for gay people and queer people, and sangkabaklaan, or the whole of the bakla community, is our term for the LGBTQIA community. Now, I have kind of a disclaimer, because while yes, I am very adamant that bakla is not a slur, has my experience with the word always been positive? Absolutely not. And those are for two reasons. One is, of course, internalized homophobia. Like growing up, I never wanted to be called bakla because I didn't accept that I was queer. So growing up, I always took it as an insult whenever someone called me that. But that was simply because I had internalized homophobia. Again, with our main character who accepts himself to be a gay or queer person, it doesn't make sense, because if you are accepting yourself to be queer, why are you not accepting yourself to be bakla, which is literally the same thing? And the other reason that I kind of had an aversion to the term was because of bisexual erasure. Now, I am very openly a gay-leaning bisexual man, but it took me a long process to accept that while I am not as attracted to women as I am with men, I still was, and I was still bisexual, and I hated when people would just dismiss me as bakla or gay when I was bisexual. Like, I hated that erasure. I hated that people would just dismiss that I was attracted to women. Again, this doesn't make sense for our main character, who is a homosexual, not bisexual. So there is literally no reason for him to take offense at being called bakla. But recently, in fact, just in the past year or so, I've learned to appreciate my language and the labels that it offers for queer people like me. Yes, I've used the terms queer and bisexual interchangeably, but I've better learned recently to appreciate the gift of the word bakla because of the way that it encompasses many Filipino queer identities. Like I said earlier, bakla can mean a gay man, a bisexual man, it can mean a trans woman, it can mean a lot of things that people identify as queer in the Filipino community. And so it just absolutely rubbed me the wrong way for this book to say that it is a Tagalog gay slur, or that ain't a cool word, because my label is not your slur, and you'd better understand the nuances and the meaning of this word before you even call it that, because calling it a slur erases our identity. It erases the labels that we have for us in our language. And if you don't take the time to understand our language, then don't use it. Don't pretend to know what it means when it could very much send the harmful message to others who don't know any better that bakla is the equivalent of the English F word, like the F slur that is used often for gay people. Like, I can assure you without a shadow of a doubt that if I showed these quotes to any other of my bakla or gay friends here, they would be like, that's what I identify as. Why is it being called a slur? So saying that this word is a slur that people use to identify with erases the queer identity and experience of many queer Filipinos. This is not our experience. This is very dismissive. Frankly, it's very harmful. It's so weird for me to read this about the word bakla being a slur because we as a Filipino queer community, we've worked so hard to fight for acceptance and tolerance for people like us, to the point where bakla is actually used as a term for endearment. Even straight people, they use it as like, tara na akla, yan ka na naman akla, itong mga bakla na naman na to. It's being reclaimed to the point where instead of letting others claim the word for us and use the word bakla as a pejorative, we're reclaiming it and using it as something positive, as something that binds us together. And it's just really disappointing because with the amount of publicity that this book is getting, because it's supposed to be the Filipino queer book of our time, it doesn't have any respect for Filipino queer identities. I want to make it known that this is not representative of me. And I know I'm not Filipino American, but the way it uses my language and my words and twists it into something different, it's just very frustrating. And the amount of people from the US, or I guess from Western countries, or I guess other countries that are not the Philippines, just heaping praise on this book without actually acknowledging the harm that this could do, it's just very frustrating. This to me says that the author is so far removed from the culture, which isn't anyone's fault, because of course there are a lot of Filipino Americans out there, and of course their experiences are valid. But if you're gonna use a word very commonly used at home, or I guess in the homeland, you have to be sensitive about it. You have to do your basic research. And if literally you've consulted a Filipino beta reader for this, they could have told you that. And maybe the author did, and then in that case, I'm sorry that that person didn't tell you that this is not a slur. My label is not your slur. And there are other things that I've noticed that kind of hint that the author is just so far removed from the culture here in the homeland. Like, for example, there was a reel that he posted on Instagram about the cover of his book being on fully booked BGC, like here in the Philippines. And he referred to the Philippines as the PI, which is a term that I've only heard Filipino Americans and World War II American veterans use. Because the term PI is something that Americans have used to refer to the Philippines when we were their colony. No one in the homeland refers to the Philippines as the PI. That's a term used by Americans. And also, PI in the Philippines means putang ina, which is a curse word that translates to your mother is a whore. Anyway, there's another reason that I don't recommend this book to anyone, and that's because if you recall earlier, I was on the street team, and the rule was don't leave a negative review if you didn't like the book. And I respected that. That's why when I finished the book, I just gave it a rating on Goodreads. I didn't put a review. I was like, I will wait until this is published and then I'll put the review so that it's not gonna hurt sales. But shortly after I posted my star rating, Rod messaged me, and I will read to you his message. He said, "Hi Spence, I saw your 2-star review and your acne tweet," which, let me just say, I did not post a review, I posted a rating. And the acne tweet, I never tagged him in that. I was just saying, I need authors to stop equating acne to ugliness. So for him to even reference this just shows a lot of insecurity on his part. He continues, "I'm sorry you didn't enjoy Chasing Pacquiao, but nowhere in it does anyone call Rex ugly for having acne. Bobby only comments that Rex has acne from shooting steroids, which is a proven side effect. I wanted readers to know the consequences of doing steroids, which also includes roid raging, which Rex exhibits. Bobby does jokingly call him Bruno Scars, which is not nice, but keep in mind that he's a teen who was severely beaten by Rex. Anyway, I hope you at least found some positive aspects in the story." And I didn't respond to that, obviously, because it's not really appropriate for an author to be responding to a reader's review or via DM. But literally not 2 hours later, he messages again. Again, the insecurity is bleeding through here. He says, "I do realize, though, that readers are impressionable and any type of prejudice should be handled carefully. It wasn't my intent to show Rex as physically ugly, but to have an accurate depiction of a steroid user." Now, again, if Rod had waited until I had actually posted a review to understand where I'm coming from, then maybe he wouldn't have messaged me to say this, because the whole acne thing is just one of many reasons I didn't like the book. And the whole thing with, like, I wanted to portray him as accurate as I can as a steroid user doesn't really do it for me, because again, it doesn't make me like the main characters just because they resort to insulting people's physical appearance just because they don't like the person. And that was really, I don't know, that was very inappropriate for him to reach out to me like that. I know I'm in the street team, and maybe that's why he thought that it was okay for him to do that, but it's just, I don't know, it's just very inappropriate for an author to defend his book because of a negative review. And it wasn't even a review at the time, it was just a rating. So like, you could have at least let me explain my side before you come after me with this message. I never responded, but not too long after, he decided to kick me out of the Slack team. I was like, I'm going through my social media one day and I opened Slack and I was no longer in the street team. Like, he didn't even explain. And honestly, it's fine. Like, I didn't want to promote his book anymore anyway. But I don't know, that to me just speaks to like lack of communication skills, really. Because here's the thing, I've heard other things about Rod. Some of them I'm not at liberty to say, but I've heard stories where whenever people try to explain to Rod that, hey, something you've written is not nice or it's, you know, fatphobic or inaccurate, he would try to say that like, you just don't get it. And recently someone actually reached out to me and said to me they'd actually known Rod for a long time, and he was in this online forum where he actually lied about his age, which is very concerning because he was in a community with a lot of girls who were minors, and he would act very flirty. So it was very inappropriate for him to lie about his age in an online forum where there were a lot of minors who can be very impressionable. I'm not going to give specifics beyond that because I've asked this person and that's all that they're, I guess, willing for me to say. In conclusion, all the reasons why I do not recommend Chasing PACQUIAO by Rod Pulido. Number one, even as a book with like the major problems I've had, it's just a very mid story and you could pass on it. And number two, I really hate the offensive erasure and redefinition of the word bakla. There's obviously no sensitivity and research put into this, or even just basic consultation. And then there's the problematic character of the author, like DMing people after they've posted negative reviews and lying about your age in an online forum where there are minors. I just don't recommend Chasing PACQUIAO. I really didn't want to make this video mainly because I didn't want to just be seen as someone who goes after like authors or books that I don't like, but I think that last thing is really what pushed me. When a person reached out to me and say, here's my experience with Rod, I was like, oh no, like this is not appropriate at all, and awareness has to be raised about that. Like, if you're gonna support this author, here's what you need to know about him. Will I get backlash for this? Probably. But just know, because I have terrible mental health issues, if you come for me, I'll just block you. End of story. That is it. I hope this was informative, and this honestly, hopefully it convinces you not to read this book. At the end of the day, that's your call. But if you have any thoughts, and please keep it respectful, I'll leave those in the comments or reach out to me. I do not want Rod Pulido in my DMs anymore. Thank you very much. That is it. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.